Are we live? What's going on here? Oh, are we live? Come on. I can't see you. Cannot see it. Going live now. Going live. Hello, my baby gorillas. Are we live? Come on, baby. Where are we? Oh my goodness, can't see myself. It's all very exciting this when it starts off, isn't it? Oh, there we are. There we are. Hello, my baby gorillas. Have you missed me? Not half as much as I've missed you. Get your comments in, guys. Let's have a little chat. Oh, I love you guys. Oh, what have we got today? More of the Alex Salmond, Nicola Sturgeon conspiracy, the fish wars. And let's go and find out what's happening today. So this is from Sky News. James Matthews, very important journalist, massive, wee baldy guy, nice guy. Sturgeon faces new questions over salmon complaints. Oh my goodness, when was this? 7 hours ago. So James Matthews is right on the ball, right on the money. He watches the Guerilla TV channel, gets his news from that, then reports back to Sky News. Sturgeon faces new questions over salmon complaints. Now, I'll get to the Craig Murray affidavit in a second. But I thought this would be quite interesting. Give Sky News a wee plug as we're going up. It's always good to help the smaller guys. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon faces new questions over whether or not her government misled the country's highest court over the Alex Salmond affair. There she is, looking a bit perturbed. Just counting down her days now, aren't we, Nicola? It centres on the date when she first learned of the complaints of sexual harassment, or not, as the case may be. All of the sexual harassment complaints were thrown out, and we can see some sort of orchestration here. Some level of orchestration, which we'll go into Mr. Murray in a second, against Mr. Salmond, her predecessor and former mentor. You have to watch the people you bring through, Alex. Miss Sturgeon gave the Scottish Parliament a date of the 2nd of April 2018. So this is why we need a public inquiry, not a parliamentary inquiry. That has already led to claims that she misled Parliament. But she's also not just misled Parliament by doing that, also the covering up of the legal advice from Mr. QC Dunlop, the lead QC in the country, that she has also covered up the legal advice that he gave her not to, which was the correct advice there as well, not to proceed with the persecution of Alex Salmond with this conspiracy. And so so uh, yeah, so which she denies. So Alex Salmond has also said that they had contacted each other in March in the Parliament. So they're in parliamentary business because it was connected with the people apparently associated. These people who have made allegations are apparently associated with Nicola Sturgeon, but because all these and within the civil servants, and they've all got some sort of connection with Nicola Sturgeon. So if you think of a Black Widow and Nicola Sturgeon being the Black Widow, all these strands all go back of the web, go back to her. And we don't know this for a fact because the names have been redacted, and we the plebs are not allowed to know if this is an orchestrated conspiracy. But she denies this, although there were other people apparently at the meeting in March, as far as I'm aware. So this was in the Parliament. This wasn't the second meeting, which was away from the Parliament in Nicola Sturgeon's home. This was actually taken in the Parliament, where she may have known about these sexual allegations that weren't sexual at all, some of them. And the Scottish Government lawyers gave the same version to the Court of Session which has led to questions over whether Scotland's highest civil court was told the truth. So this is now becoming criminal. This is well past the did you lie to the Parliament, etc. This is now verging in the criminal, and people need to go to jail for actually telling lies, like potentially Nicola Sturgeon's husband, who's now been forced to come back to Parliament next week. But the parliamentary inquiry has already been discredited because they are not prepared to put Alex Salmond's summation forward to the public, and yet they're basically covering this up. So Jackie Baillie, MSP, Labour MP, a member of the Scottish Parliamentary Committee, looking into the government's handling of the complaints against Mr. Salmond, told Sky News anything less than the whole truth told to the highest court in the land is a huge issue for the First Minister, because it's basically perjury. Could be the perversion of justice. Could be abuse of public office. There's a number of things that it can actually go into. This reinforces why our committee wants and the public deserves a full and frank answers from her. Not just that, we also require a public inquiry. Mrs. Morell, version of events form part. I just said virgin there. I thought that was a Freudian slip of the tongue. Mrs. Morell's version of events form part of the case. Pleadings, the formal writing submissions to the court by both sides, referring to Mrs. Morell's as the interested party. The pleadings state that she first became aware of the existence of an investigation into the petitioner's Alex Salmond's conduct on April 2018, when the petitioner made her so aware. But this is big porky pies, because there was an event in the Parliament on the 28th. Scotland's First Minister has faced persistent questions surrounding the 2nd April 2018 date. Whoa. While she has insisted that was the day she learned of the complaints against Mr. Salmond when she met him at her home, Sky News has revealed details that raise questions about her account. So it's not just questions about her account. If she is orchestrated it in collusion with other people, will have bound to have known it prior to this date, because obviously she may well have orchestrated it allegedly. We reported an account of a meeting that took place in her office 4 days before. But I would suspect if it's orchestrated, it's had to go on even before the 29th of March 2018, allegedly. The First Minister was present at the meeting, along with a senior governmental official and Jeff Aberdeen, Mr. Salmond's former Chief of Staff. So there was a number of people there. They would have to be sworn in to actually give the correct summation of what happened at that actual meeting on the 29th. At least one person present at the meeting maintains the government investigation into Mr. Salmond was discussed there and then. So that's two. That's Mr. Salmond and somebody else saying that this was actually discussed at this initial meeting on the 29th of March. It was 2 weeks after our revelations in July last year that Scotland's First Minister said she had forgotten. Well, I can't remember. I'm open and transparent, but I can't remember. About the meeting, adding that she thought it did cover the suggestion that the matter might relate to allegations of a sexual nature touching somebody's knee. She made the statement in a written submission to Holyrood Harassment Committee. The details of the 29th of March meeting and arrangements made to have it. Sorry, the details of the 29th of March meeting to 2018 meeting and arrangements made to have it have fed into opposition claims that Mrs. Morell, misled Scotland's Parliament and in doing so broke the ministerial code. Their allegations are focused on SNP business versus government business and the different obligations surrounding both. SNP party business does not need to be recorded, but the Scottish Ministerial Code dictates that a government affairs do. And this was held in the Parliament. Records were not kept on the 29th of March 2018, which was held in the Parliament meeting, or the one on the 2nd of April 2018. So there's obviously been some sort of trying to suppress these details just now, which was quite clever by Nicola, trying to cover up. Obviously, she's orchestrated it. She's trying to look like she's on Alex's side while being Brutus to Alex Salmond Caesar. MSPs on the harassment committee have told Sky News they want to probe. I think there's been a lot of probing done. The 29th of March 2018 meeting, because if a government investigation was indeed discussed, that would constitute government business, and so records should have been kept. Very exciting. If its purpose was to arrange the 2nd of April meeting 2018 to further discuss a government investigation, minutes should have been kept on that meeting too. Failure to do so, they say, would constitute a breach of the ministerial code, and Nicola would have to resign. I think there's been a breach in the ministerial code because she brought forward the prosecution of Alex Salmond, but was told by the Mr. Dunlop QC that she shouldn't have brought it forward. Jackie Bailey, a Labour MSP who sits on the committee, told Sky News it's already clear that the First Minister had knowledge of complaints against Mr. Salmond before her stated date of the 2nd of April 2018. And that would be even clearer if they had orchestrated it, so she would have had to know about it. She had only latterly acknowledged that the meeting 4 days beforehand even took place. It's a serious matter, more than just a simple diary confusion. In this case, 4 days is the difference between telling a significant truth and a significant untruth, i.e., to the Parliament and the Court of Session, and that has far-reaching implications. Not for the first time, we are in a position where we have important questions but precious few answers. Sky News asked the government if the Court of Session had been misled, perjury, by its submission to the judicial review, which is Alex Salmond's first trial. We also asked for the confirmation that information was given to its lawyers by the First Minister herself. Let me just read that again. We also asked for confirmation that information was given to its lawyers by the First Minister herself. I don't know what that means. A response from the government, the Scottish Government spokesperson, stated the First Minister stands by what she has already said to the Parliament and her written evidence. She looks forward to repeating the same thing over and over again when we all know she's telling lies. Allegedly, answering any further questions at the committee when she appears in person. Although Alex Salmond's statement will not be allowed to be given to the public. That's very interesting, isn't it? if they have, meanwhile, Mr. Salmond has said he will only appear before the Holyrood Harassment Committee or the Alex Salmond fake sex crime conspiracy committee if they allegedly publish a written submission he made that includes claims that Nicola Sturgeon repeatedly misled Parliament and broke the ministerial code. The claims are centred partly on questions around the meetings in March and April 2018. The former First Minister is due to give evidence, although we've already been told that because there's no legal advice for the 7 out of the 9 non-legal entities, MSPs, on the actual board, that this is going to cause them problems to accurately cross-examine the witnesses and hold them to account. And this is why we need a public inquiry before the committee on Tuesday, and Mrs. Morell, Miss Sturgeon, is scheduled to appear a week later on the 16th of February. So let's move along here. So this is why we're all here anyway, aren't we? Got 11 people, I think, watching. So this is what we're here for just now. This is Mr. Murray, who is now up, craigmurray.org.uk. Apparently, Mr. Murray is a big name. He's a historian, former ambassador, and human rights activist. And this is Mr. Murray own blog he's got up online, and he's now in trouble just now. I put up the thing saying that I think it might be a judge only and not jury and judge trial. So this may be a set up by the government because of this affidavit. So he gave evidence in his written affidavit. So he's been highly thought of in the Nationalist Party, the Scottish National Party, and in the wider independence movement apparently, and he's a big name in this. So it's not like this has came from out with. This is internally within the SNP. And this man has chosen to do the correct thing rather for the general populace rather than the wrong thing for internal party politicking, and said that an innocent man shouldn't go to jail and have his situation or his smearing of his reputation done without him actually coming forward for this. So this is framing the orchestration and how the orchestration happened, who's basically involved in this orchestration, which is why we need a public inquiry. My sworn evidence on the Sturgeon affair or Alex Salmond fake sex crimes conspiracy. Updated in addition to the substantial and very careful redactions made before the publication, I have now made 6 more specific redactions at the request of the Crown Office, who are also implicated in this, which is very agitated. I do think that this prevents the publication of those affidavits from still being useful. I swore on oath 2 affidavits for my trial for contempt of court and adopted them as my evidence today. I didn't get to actually give the evidence orally, as almost the entire trial was done on paper. Although my QC specifically made a point of saying I was happy to take the stand for cross-examination by the Crown or questioned by the judges. So this is a judge trial, not a jury trial. So it's easier, obviously, to influence a judge politically from the First Minister than it is from a jury addressing all juries. Liar Sturgeon and the SNP's tea is out. Time to resign By the way, glad to see you work on a Sunday as well. Yeah, no rest for the wicked, mate. No rest for the wicked, Michael. So, was done on paper, although my QC specifically made a point of saying I was happy, right? So we've done that. This was not taken up by the judges. When you go through the process, you realise that this giving of evidence on oath is quite a solemn thing. So I'm quite happy going to give you the text of my evidence for now without any comment, but redacted to prevent jigsaw identification of court protected identities. So now that there's no criminal charges levied because none of the 9 or 10 initial um, victims actually their evidence stuck. So they why are they getting protected? If it's been a fix and a setup, why are their identities now being protected? They're not victims. They have potentially um, given false accounts or exaggerated accounts, and really we have to then talk about the prosecution of these 9 to find out if there's any perjury or perverting the course of justice. Or I think there should be specific crimes for making false allegations. Full stop. If you look at Ocasio, what's her name? Alexandria Ocasio Smollett in America. She just lies all the time without any condemnation or actually going to jail. She should be, if you're making false statements, false allegations, you have to be criminally prosecuted and potentially go to jail. And I don't even for if this was orchestrated, so that would be one standalone set of crimes. But the orchestration of these false sexual allegations has to be a criminal as well, or any other allegations. Power breeds corruption and cover-ups. Extended power breeds. Yes, exactly, mate. Exactly. So, jigsaw identification of our court protected identities. I don't believe in court protected identities. If you're making an allegation, you should have the decency to stand up and make the allegation in court. Affidavit 1. Affidavit of Craig Murray, redaction, Edinburgh, redaction. At Edinburgh on the 25th day of August 2020, in the presence of David James Finlay Halliday, I think that's Doc Halliday, solicitor and notary public Halliday Campbell WS, solicitors, redaction, Edinburgh, whatever, redaction, compared, Craig Murray, redaction, Edinburgh, whatever, redaction, who being solemnly sworn by the depones as follows. The depones. Number 1. My name is Craig Murray. I reside at Redaction, Edinburgh, whatever, Redaction. I am 61 years old. A retired diplomat, now a historian and journalist. I was the rector of University of Dundee between 2007 and 2010, and an honorary research fellow at the University of Lancaster School of Law 2005 to 2009. I am the author of books including Skillcunder, Burns, Master of the Game 2017, The Catholic Origin of Togo, that sounds absolutely fascinating, you can buy that, 2010, and Murder in Samarkand, 2007. The website academia.edu lists over 130 academic peer reviews articles referencing my work. Number 3, I was a British ambassador to Uzbekistan 2002 to 2004. Other roles include Deputy High Commissioner to Ghana, my goodness, 1999 to 2002. Deputy Head Equatorial New Guinea, I think that would be. African Department of Foreign Commonwealth Office to 1997 to 99 or 2009. First Secretary, British Embassy, Warsaw, 1993 to what? 1937. No, going back in time, are we? And head of Maritime Section for the Foreign Commonwealth Office from 1991 to 93, and head of Cyprus Section for the FCO 1989 to 1991. So he's obviously quite an important gentleman. Number 4, special responsibilities include head of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office Section, Embargo Surveillance Centre, 1990, alternate head of UK designation of UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1981 to 93, and head of UK delegation to the Sierra Leone peace talks, 1998 to 2000. 5. I have been aware the Sam Adams Award for Integrity USA 2005 and the Premio Alto Quality della Città di Bologna, or whatever, Italy 2006, and an officer of the Order of Monotogo. I have turned down 3 honours from the British states, OBE, LVO, and CVO, on the grounds of Scottish nationalism. So he's obviously committed. I think this is some of his works here, isn't it? Let's just make this bigger, see if we can get it bigger, eh? Oh, that's quite good, I like that. Okay, so where are we down to? Surveillance. The last 2 being in the personal gift of Her Majesty the Queen. So he's obviously quite well thought of by the establishment as well for being a Scottish nationalist. As a journalist in new media, my outpost has been focused on my own website. I think that's it, which is nowadays my primary source of income. My articles have been, however, published in newspapers including The Guardian, Independent, Daily Mail, Mail and Sunday, and very many others, both nationally and internationally. Ooh. I have been shown paragraph 11 of the Lord Advocate's written submissions, which suggest that I published material not in the public domain, i.e. the orchestration of these fake sexual allegations by Nicola Sturgeon, because the stated purpose of my blog is to use insider knowledge of the government to interpret contemporary events, i.e. the faking orchestration of Alex Salmond's fake sexual allegations allegedly. What I said is not reference to acquiring material from inside the Scottish Government and publishing it. It is a reference to using my experience at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to provide authoritative commentary on and interpretations of contemporary events, whether in Scotland, the United Kingdom, or the wider world. In August, number 8, in August of 2018, I read the Scalculus account published by the Daily Record on an alleged sexual assault by Alex Salmond on a civil servant in Bute House. Aspects of the story appeared to me highly unlikely, as if they were made up. Can you imagine that? In the particular, the willingness of the civil servants to simply obey his instructions, like Lemon's, his instructions, going to the bedroom and lying on the bed. On August 26, 2018, I therefore published an article on my blog expressing this opinion. A short, so it's https www.craigmurray.org.uk/archives 2018 /08, a short article not mentioning Alex Salmond, which is quite funny. Number 9, I made no attempt to discover the identities of the civil servants who allegedly are connected to Nicola Sturgeon involved, but I did make strenuous efforts to discover who had leaked the story to the media. Liz Lloyd, who I was up complaining about the other day there. Remember that, guys? I'm well ahead of this game, haven't I? Calling and meeting a wide range of contacts in Edinburgh and Glasgow. To my surprise, I discovered with a high degree of certainty that the leaker and potential abuser of her public office, betraying her civil servant duties and her code of conduct, which should lead her to being sacked and potentially being prosecuted as well. There might be criminal charges here as well. That the leaker was Liz Lloyd, chief of Nicola Sturgeon's, or chief of staff to Nicola Sturgeon. See what I was talking about? All the silk coming back to the widow, the Black Widow, Nicola Sturgeon, or Mrs. Nicola Morel. I also discovered that she had a personal history with the journalist. So we can see the marrying up of the political and the journalists to release stories concerned, and did not think it. With the journalist concerned, and did not link it to my mind to anything wider than that. So he didn't look at it as a huge big conspiracy with people in the Vietnam groups and things like that. 10. In January 2019, I published an article following Mr. Salmond's resounding victory in his judicial review against Nicola Sturgeon's government, the Scottish government. My article focused on the abuses of civil service procedure in pursuit of Mr. Salmond by Leslie Evans and Judith McKinnon, two other protagonists. I was up chapping and finding out if they were going to resign, and called for them both to be sacked. So I have now started, as my journalism grows, asked if whether these women are all going to resign and stand down from their office and potentially have criminal proceedings against them now prosecuted. So he's written another article here, www.craigmurray.org.uk/2019/01/ the stitch up the incredible facts and why McKinnon and Evans must be sacked. So here we go, number 11. The article concluded that if Nicola Sturgeon failed to act against them, it might indicate that she, Nicola Sturgeon, wee nippy, was herself involved in the campaign of false allegations against Mr. Salmond, allegedly. Oh, all these women allowing these false sexual allegations against these men, they have to be held accountable. Jail time. 12. As a result of this article, Alex Salmond, with whom I had only very slight prior acquaintance, invited me to meet him in the George Hotel in Edinburgh. Here, for the first time, he told me that Nicola Sturgeon had been behind the process designed to generate false allegations against him. He said as well, McKinnon and Evans and Lloyd were responsible for actual orchestration. Oh, a group of women making up false sexual allegations, allegedly. Oh my goodness, this is horrific. This is horrific. This is jail time. This isn't just having to leave office. This is jail time. This has to go in front of a judge, although but we already know the Crown Office is compromised. Oh, how are we going to resolve this? Public inquiry. Public inquiry. Number 13. Mr. Salmond further said that the Scottish Government had made every effort to withhold vital evidence from Lord Pentland, who had ordered a process of commission and evidence on the available documentation. It was on the day that witnesses from Nicola Sturgeon's private office were due to give evidence as to her own knowledge and involvement, and the Scottish Government suddenly conceded the case rather than this evidence heard. We're open and transparent, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, but we're going to fold like a pack of cards as soon as we have to give evidence. Is that the Scottish Government suddenly conceded the case rather than have this evidence heard. Oh my goodness, what have we got up here? 14. Mr. Salmond further told me that there was a massive police operation underway. Police are compromised as well, allegedly. Operation underway to try and get the accusers to come forward against him. So the combination of special advisors, civil servants, the government, police, Crown Office, all need to be investigated. This was going to ludicrous lengths. This was going to ludicrous lengths. He showed me an email from one woman to him in which she stated that she had been called in and interviewed by the police because many years ago Alex Salmond had been seen by other persons to have been kissing her on the cheek. Oh my God, he's kissed her on the cheek. Practically rape. All the guys, we all need to go to jail because I've kissed girls on the cheek as well. Ladies, women, every day. My mum, I've essentially assaulted my mum by kissing her on the cheek. My goodness, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? That would to me come under false sexual allegations. This woman obviously didn't come forward because she found it completely acceptable for Alex Salmond to greet her by kissing her on the cheek. But that's not really a sexual, even a wee peck on the lips, not really a sexual encounter, is it? It's only if you touch people in intimate places. It's not just making up sexual allegations just for the sake of it. And this is why I asked Alex Salmond if Nicola Sturgeon was a lesbian, because if she is a lesbian, she's got penisophobia and she hates being a bit misandrous, then anything is going to be seen like a sexual assault because she's an intersectional Marxist lesbian feminist, allegedly, and she doesn't want any sort of touching with men, including her husband, which is potentially why she's not getting any children, and yet she's prepared to criminalise any man's actions, even if it's something innocuous like kissing somebody on the cheek. This is why I asked you if she was a lesbian the other day, because I could see where her policies were going as if she was a lesbian. And I don't think Janet Cherry would be any better than that, because she's definitely a misandrist as well. And both of them have penisophobia, hence no children from either of them. And in a declining population, they've not even bothered to stand up. They've not even been surrogates for somebody else, unless they've got medical reasons. But I don't think both of them have got medical reasons. I think they've just got penisophobia. And is there a requirement for the LGBT community to actually have children and continue the population in a declining population? Or are they just exempt from being part of the overall society? He understood that over 400 people had been interviewed by the police. 400 people? Why the hell would you be investigating 400 people? And they investigated 400 and could only find 10. So, I mean, really? And some of those were spurious allegations which shouldn't have been brought forward. In fact, I would say that they're fake sexual allegations. But you're going to then have the problem of the police investigating it, who were used by the government. It's a hierarchical organisation, the police, right up to the police being under the First Minister's jurisdiction. So they're not exactly going to be able to be objective about a proper investigation into the First Minister orchestrating these sexual allegations, are they? So, 15, he said these interviewed by the police had included all the personal protection officers he had as First Minister. Was he kissing them on the cheek as well? They had all said they had seen him doing nothing. Let me repeat that. They had all said that they had seen him doing nothing wrong. They said they were watching him very closely, as you would, as was their job. At least one of these policemen, now retired, had been given a rundown of evidence by the policeman sent to interview him. The retired officer challenged the interviewer as to how he could be involved in such a corrupt stitch-up. Oh, so the retired police officer knew that the new police officer was stitching up the First Minister, former First Minister. Orchestration by the police through the government. He stated that the fact it was a stitch-up was evidenced by the fact all the accusations emanated from the same small coyote ugly team coterie. There was not a single accusation from an outside or independent source. So it was from the cabal. The cabal. 16. The observation stayed with me as I followed the investigation. The case, investigated case. Shut up, Dave. The observation stayed with me as I followed and investigated the case over the next year, and it remains a key fact. I was strongly inclined to believe Mr. Salmond. I am of much the same generation of the Scottish political class, and it's a small country. We tend to know each other or of each other. I had never in 40 years heard a hint of gossip surrounding Alex Salmond and sexual behaviour, with a single exemption of a rumoured romantic redacted attachment with redacted. I don't know who redacted does, but she seems very popular in that statement. But that had not involved any rumour or unwanted advances by Mr. Salmond. How do you know an advance is unwanted or unwanted unless you make it? What are we doing? Morse code now? What is it? Would you like to go in today? Oh, that's an unwanted advance. Well, I didn't know until it was unwanted until you just said it's unwanted, did I? You've already got a declining birth rate. How are we meant to? Are we going to wait for women to approach us? Who are only interested in the 80% of women are interested in 10% or 20% of men. Ideas above the station, some of them. But that had not involved a rumour of unwanted advances by Mr. Salmond. Quite the opposite. Big Studley Salmond was getting hit on by some chick. It was rather widely believed in nationalist circles that she had set her cap at him. I'm not sure what they're talking about. I don't know if that's that femidom cap or I don't know what that cap is. I don't know why women are wearing caps. The common joke was that Redacted, is her name Redacted? I don't know. Mrs. Redacted McFarlane was a booby prize. I don't know if that's about her breasts or I don't know. A booby prize. 17. It had been impossible to follow the judicial review case without concluding that a very unfair process had been undertaken. A conspiratorial, we like to say, case had been undertaken against Alex Salmond, and that it was impossible this could have happened without the knowledge and approval of Nicola Sturgeon. That was a shocking realisation to an independent supporter like myself. Without the knowledge and approval and the setting up of Nicola Sturgeon, allegedly. But what Alex Salmond was now telling me went further, which was that Nicola Sturgeon is up to her neck in this and was involved in the orchestration of fake sexual complaints against Alex Salmond. This was fairly astonishing on first hearing, but completely understandable if you think about politics in a neutral manner, and that Nicola Sturgeon was doing such a bad job as First Minister that Alex Salmond could have come back and taken back over the party for her being incompetent. And she's not been competent in any objective sense, regardless if you're an independent supporter or not. She's not been competent in her role as First Minister. For clarity, the word retracted means edited. Yes, Michael, thanks. I was only joking. I already knew that, my friend. I understand. That was a wee bit levity such a serious thing. But yes, I know what redacted means, mate. I think it's a legal term as well. It's to redact somebody's name as well. But thanks anyway. Sometimes I get it wrong anyway, so you just keep up your observations. 18. Here we go. I asked what the motive could be. Alex replied that he did not know. Perhaps it was Leigh and King Lear. I would suggest it was more Caesar, Brutus, and Caesar. That's what I would suggest. Although when Caesar had gone away, he had become more powerful, or a bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi when he gets struck down by Darth Vader. Maybe that's a wee bit more like it. He said that he had genuinely intended to quit politics and had lined up a position as chairman of Johnston Press, which had fallen through because a group of women and men allegedly made false sexual allegations, or not the victims being men, they're all women. So a lot of false allegations from these 9 women, 4 women in the civil servants and whatever, and Nicola Sturgeon. So there's quite a lot of women involved in this who seem to be happy or certainly content enough to go through with allegations of making false sexual allegations that they think from a moral point of view that that's acceptable, and from a legal point of view that should be criminal. And the failure by our judicial system not to have a standalone crime of making false sexual allegations, to me, has to be addressed, and especially the orchestration of these false sexual allegations. But he had retired from the party leadership before, wasn't in politics, wasn't really a threat to Nicola Sturgeon, but now he could come back into the party and take her on regardless. So there's nothing that should prevent him coming back into the SNP and then come back, and perhaps Nicola had concluded he needed to go, just make up false sexual allegations, destroy his reputation, destroy his life, potentially put him in jail, and that's him finished politically. And that's, I would say, pretty much the case. That's what her mindset would have been. She is intelligent enough to do that, but how disgusting to actually make false sexual allegations against somebody, especially somebody who orchestrated and helped you get to the position you are in. And obviously completely the wrong person that was brought forward on this case. And I would suggest that this is well past having to resign because of misleading the Parliament. I think that this is potentially criminal, and you should be on trial. You and the rest of the Harpy squad should be on trial for abusing your position of office, perjury, and false allegations. Well, false allegations, but preferred in the course of justice as well. So at least 3, if not more, crimes, and I would suggest that this is a criminal matter, not even a political matter anymore. He had made plain to her that he was not happy with the lack of progress towards an independence referendum following the Brexit vote. Now, I'm going to just read out this, and then what I'm going to do is do another thing later on today with regards to this again, other clips as well. So, where did I get to? Allegations. I was asked, 18, I was asked about notice, King Lear, blah, 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 blah. He had made it plain to her that he was not happy with the lack of progress towards an independence referendum. And I don't think they're going to get, the SNP are going to get an independence referendum, because if Boris says no, what are they going to do? Unless they fought this next election, saying that if they get a majority in the Scottish Parliament, they were going to do a unilateral declaration of independence if Boris didn't give them a referendum. There isn't very much they could do. So Boris says no, what are you going to do? You've been completely incompetent on domestic issues. Completely incompetent. I've not seen a more incompetent bunch. I thought the Labour Party were bad. But I mean, really, honestly, it's going from one bad bunch to another bad bunch. And really, it's just absolutely badly executed policies. I mean, you're wasting time on some girl talking about microaggressions in the Scottish Parliament, trans rights, and hate speech bills to criminalise people, and you can't even grow the economy. You're not competent to continue in governance. So he had made it plain to her that he was not happy with her lack of progress towards an independence referendum following the Brexit vote. 19, Alex Salmond was plainly very unhappy. Well, I think if you had get 9 or 10 sexual allegations, your reputation was going to be destroyed. You were some of the most powerful women in the country was trying to put you in jail for false sexual allegations. I guess that would probably make you unhappy. I mean, what a little shit she is. Was plainly very unhappy. He said that he believed that Nicola was banking on his loyalty to take it right in the ass and go to jail to the SNP and to the independence movement, thinking he would not split the party by revealing what or who was behind the allegations against him. Now, I was shouting out questions at Alex Salmond, and I didn't know any of this. I had no understanding of this. I knew instinctively. I didn't have any meetings with anybody from the SNP. I knew one guy in the SNP, and I didn't have any meetings. I didn't speak to anybody, and that's why I didn't know if it was the Unionists or the SNP that set it up. And that's why I was quizzing him. So I'd be very interested to find out what Alex Salmond, when I was shouting out questions, because it would have been a difficult time for him going into court and having to put himself in. Luckily, there wasn't too much harassment from the populace, but there wasn't a lot of support from either for a former First Minister and a competent former First Minister. But I knew instinctively that it was Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon has to go to jail. It's not even the case that she has to stay in First Minister. She has to go to jail for doing this, thinking that he was not. Would not split the party by revealing what or who was behind the allegations against him. At this crucial time, the fish wars, Salmond versus Sturgeon split could derail the chance for independence and have truly historic effect. I don't think the SNP are going to have to change anyway. The current position on things is not going to work. If Johnston says no, you're not getting a referendum, what are you going to do? You're going to moan for the next 4 years and badly execute any domestic policies in Scotland, which you've been completely incompetent at. At the critical time, blah, 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 I asked him directly whether this meant he did not want me to publish this information at that moment. I would take it would be. He confirmed I should not publish. This conversation was in confidence, but as my blog was highly influential within the independence movement, so obviously there's a big time Charlie within the independence movement, he thought it vital that I knew the truth as matters developed. 20. I told him that Sturgeon's hostility towards him seemed to be long-standing. Oh, so she was always that sort of bitter. But I mean, if she's a wee misandrous lesbian anyway, a wee man-hating lesbian in a sham marriage, she's probably got a lot of pent-up hostility. But she's also a globalist shill. So let's not kid on. That's her underlying ideology. It's not Scottish independence. It's shilling for the globalists. I recounted a story I had been told by Robert McAlpine of an occasion shortly after his resignation when Alex Salmond had arrived at the Scottish Parliament for a function and the First Minister's office had refused to sign him in. Honestly, absolutely disgusting, isn't she? Sign him in after what he's been doing. Alex, and obviously, she always felt that Alex Salmond was a threat, a political threat, which he is. He is a political threat. He's still, if he was to come back, he'd be a massive political threat to her. That's why everybody's moving to the Scottish Libertarian Party. Alex replied that this was true. It was particularly embarrassing as the occasion had been to hand over a large cheque for funds raised for a charity. Oh, that's disgusting. Following a campaign he had initiated as First Minister. This had been forced to do a photo shoot outside in the rain. Well, you know that I haven't been able to gain access to my own Scottish Parliament because of Nicky and wee Nippy and the Islamo-fascist Humza Useless. And they've not been given the access, and they're getting the police to come outside and harass me and do things. You've seen all that. You've seen me getting harassed at the Alex Salmond trial. You've seen the police actually involvement in all of that as well. With all that, we know now about the lies and criminality that senior figures in the SNP are the polls which put them ahead. Also rigged. Can't believe it. No, they're not rigged. There's still an underlying. Although the people are starting to be made more aware. And you've got to understand the BBC were still going after Alex Salmond and trying to slam Alex Salmond because the BBC should be privatised, but are shilling because they know we Nippy's a globalist shill and on the globalist agenda as well. So they're trying to attack Alex Salmond. You saw Kirsty Wark, who's again not part of the conspiracy, but part of the overall globalist destroy an individual. They don't care about that. They're only interested in their own power. The BBC went after Salmond. Salmond should take them to court. Liz Lloyd, BBC, take them to court. Get a fundraiser up, Alex, and take them to court. Let's see what happens in the court. I advised Alex Salmond that he should continue to fight any allegations vigorously and should not worry in the least about any consequential damage to the SNP or the Yes movement, which were very robust. If the SNP leaders, that's answering your question here, Michael. Who bought Judy Murray's house in Dublin? I think that's right. I heard that. I believe that it was Nicola Sturgeon and this French journalist. She must be doing quite well out of $100,000 a year check that she gets for being First Minister. I don't know. I take it the Murrays are, yeah. So that's we already know this anyway. I mean, that's already out. So she's lying about her sexuality as well, which in itself nobody cares. But I won't be making videos about Ruth being a lesbo or Kezia Dugdale being a lesbo. Both of these I don't think are misandrous lesbians, and they've got nice personalities. We don't really care that these are lesbians. We do care about if they're producing children or surrogating for other people to have other people's children. They could be doing something. Hello there. How you, buddy? How you doing? Don't know if it's a guy or a girl. SRACHR. Senor. I'll just call you Senor. Senorita. I don't know. Whatever. I advised Alex Salmond that he should continue to fight any allegations vigorously, should not worry in the least about any consequential damage to the SNP. This is about false sexual allegations. This is criminal. And the Yes movement, which were very robust. If the SNP leadership were behind the attacks on him, it was much better that people knew 100%. 22. I also told him I knew exactly how he felt, having been myself subject to false accusations. So people who make false accusations must go to jail. It's not acceptable to make false allegations. Jail time, a few years, 3-4 years, that'll soon close down false allegations. 5 years, 6 years, get them in jail for a few years. They're quite happy to destroy other people's life. few 5-6 years sentences in jail for liars. Who cares? When as British ambassador, I blew the whistle on the government collusion with terror in the war on terror. Obviously human rights guy. Yeah, I've got a lot of Muslim friends as well who I love dearly, and it's yeah, I wouldn't like to see them getting tortured as well, but unfortunately, they've done a few bad things as well on the other side. To subject to a fit up, particularly by those you knew and consider friends, was extremely disorienting. To be subject to a fit up, particularly by those you knew and consider friends, was extremely disorienting. So, I mean, people who you knew, can you imagine that? Can you imagine being backstabbed and your reputation destroyed and people try to send you to jail by people who you've helped? I mean, how disgusting. Really, I mean, how vile can a creature as Nicola Sturgeon? And no wonder, I mean, all these child sex crimes happen in our constituency. What sort of moral compass has Nicola Sturgeon got? I was probably one of the few people in the UK who knew precisely how he felt. I think there's more than you. I could tell you a few stories which I think are fitting back to politics as well. 23. The meeting concluded with Alex making the observation that he blamed himself for having established a far too centralised system of power in the Scottish Government and the SNP, and now taking account of how far that was open to abuse by Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Morrell and the other orchestrators in this false, fake sexual conspiracy, allegedly of ill will. 24. In June 2019, I do know the precise date, time, and venue, but given it might aid identification of my source with deleterious consequences for them, I met with a person well known in the independence movement who informed me that they had been present at a meeting with Nicola Sturgeon and her key allies, the intersectional lesbian feminists, not produced any children, and key members of her inner circle. Let's just call it the witches' harem, including ministers, which had gamed and possibly outcome of the Salmond affair, which had gamed, so that they're basically playing through the different scenarios of what actually was going to happen if they put forward these false sexual allegations. What they didn't actually probably witness is that this was going to blow up in the face, which had gained and possible outcome of the Salmond affair. My source was trusted as a Sturgeon loyalist. Her husband, probably her husband. The view of the meeting was that if Alex Salmond could be convicted on just one single account, he would be destroyed politically forever, which was explicitly the objective. So we already know that now the political class are making false sexual allegations and that they are trying to destroy men's lives by the use of false sexual allegations that's implicit in the police and the judiciary. And there's an orchestration with all these private personal advisors and the civil servants, all involved, all involved. I mean, it's quite absolutely incredible. Did you like that? So, he would be on the register of sex offenders and branded a rapist. This is in the public. So this is why these people need to go to jail. This is well beyond just leaving because of misleading Parliament. This is jail time. This is an orchestrated attempt, a conspiracy to make these false sexual allegations. So all of these people need to be bound up and then potentially put in jail. and they have to be broken one by one. But the difficulty is if the police are invested in this, then who's going to actually do this? If the Crown Office is involved in this, who's going to do this? Where's the objectiveness going to come from? And this is why we need an independent public inquiry. Even if the actual offence convicted was knee touching, I mean, how's that an offence? How's touching somebody's knee an offence? That to me is not even, that shouldn't even be brought to trial. That's not a sexual anything. Touching somebody's knee, that's absolutely ridiculous. I was told that the law officers were, and that's probably from a lesbian. Oh, I don't like guys touching my knee because I'm a lesbian, feminist Marxist. I was also told that the law officers were confident of conviction for something. I guess if you throw enough people and make enough lies, then something's going to stick. Not one thing stuck, which is why the multiplicity of charges. They apparently advised that faced with a whole raft of charges, which Morell was trying to orchestrate down in London as well to increase the pressure, says, "Oh, I just misspoke." And this is why he's back up to actually potentially have the perjury charges. Agreed and convicted on lower charge. Sorry, I'll go back to this. Sorry, apologise, lost the train on that. They apparently advised that faced with a whole raft of charges, juries tend to compromise in the jury room to reach agreement and convict on lower charges. So anything that had stuck to him would potentially destroyed his reputation in his career. They already destroyed their job, so I would take it there should be some sort of recompense for the fact that they destroyed his position with Johnston Press, or whether he was going to do the chairman of Johnston Press. There has to be some sort of compensation if this has been orchestrated. What struck me, both at the time and still, was that it was impossible to understand the account as given without it involving of necessity corrupt collusion between Nicola Sturgeon's ministers, her herself, aides, the Crown Office, the police, the civil servants, the 9-10 people who initially made the charges, plus the one down in London, whoever that was that Morell was trying to get covered up. This is a big conspiracy over the handling of the Alex Salmond case and charges being brought. 27. I directly asked my source why they had been regarded as so trustworthy as to be included in such a meeting. They replied that they were generally highly supportive of the LGBT, lesbian, Marxist, intersectional identity politics leadership that Nippy's been putting out, and her are useless, and her leadership, and had been on the fringe of her inner circle for a while. I bet they have. Predominantly women as well. But they were not happy about fitting up Alex Salmond. This will come down like a pack of cards. Once the charges start coming out, this will come down like a pack of cards, which they described as unnecessary. 28. I was aware that in telling me this, my source was playing a double game. I was a British diplomat for 20 years and a member of the senior management structure of the FCO 46. So basically part of the government, the British government. Obtaining confidential information from inside government circles and assessing the credibility of the source and the information is a core skill set for a diplomat, isn't it? Right? And I was a highly successful diplomat, becoming the UK's youngest ambassador. Quite impressive, isn't it? 29. I considered using the FCO learned criteria, the access and motivation of my source, and my background knowledge of them, all of which I researched further. My conclusion was that this was a highly credible source with good access. This also squared with my impression. They had seemed straightforward and no inconsistencies had appeared under question. I had known them for some years. I believed their account and still do. Oh, I believe their account and I don't have any background knowledge of any of this. I was able to work it out for myself because I think politically. And I was able to get it right for myself. It was either internally or the unionists that did this to Sam. 30 at a later date, but substantially in advance of his trial, I informed Alex Salmond in broad terms of this conversation, which obviously backed up Salmond's thoughts on it as well. 31. Equally critically, this proved not just entirely equally crucially, this proved not just entirely consistent with all the further information I received. Now, bearing in mind, this guy's now up in a perjury trial and jigsawing for him releasing this documentation. So wee Nippy's obviously now targeted him. So she's targeted Alex Salmond and now targeted him for exposing the underlying conspiracy. Craig Murray, what do I mean by him? Craig Murray for exposing this underlying conspiracy and trying to put him in jail for 2 years with only three, I think it's one or three judges actually, and no jury trial for Craig Murray. So I mean, this is Nicola Sturgeon's second victim in this. Unfortunately, today touching a knee can trigger some people. It's just not sexual in any way, so that shouldn't be allowed. So I don't care if somebody's triggered. Untrigger yourself. And it should be, that to me is a fake allegation. That's a fake allegation that shouldn't be, unless the person's doing something aggressive. If somebody puts your hand on your knee and it's not aggressive and they're not trying to do anything with the knee, just touch your knee, then that's not a crime. Much of which was to be excluded from the trial itself by judges. But you can see if Nicola Sturgeon's a lesbian that she wouldn't like anybody touching her. I mean, she's wrapped up, she's buttoned up like. You can see the way she conducts herself. In March 20, sorry, let me go back to this. 31. Equally crucially, this proved not just entirely consistent with all the further information I received, but a good explanation of it. In March 2020, I had explained and briefly shown to me by sources with good access the content of evidence related to the Salmond trial, much of which was to be excluded from the trial itself by the judge as collateral. I don't know what that means. I've no idea. Somebody who's a lawyer would have to explain that. 32. The material included the message from Peter Morrell, Chief Executive Officer of the SNP, to Sue Ruddock, who's also implicated in this, Chief Operating Officer, to the effect that it was now the right time to put pressure on the police Scotland to move forward against Salmond. To me, that's collusion right there. To me, that's criminal. That should be. I mean, why is the SNP chief executive trying to put pressure on people to bring forward allegations to Police Scotland? That's an abuse of power. Because obviously his wife is the First Minister, to me that's an abuse of power. And there has to be a public inquiry into this, to the effect that it was now the right time to put pressure on Police Scotland to move forward forward against Alex Salmond. It included the message from Miss Ruddock, I do not recall the recipient, to the effect that the problem was with Police Scotland refusing to detail precisely what evidence they required. If they would specify if they would specify, then she could get the evidence for them. Let me just read that again. So I'm going to read that whole thing again. This material included the message from Peter Morrell, Chief Executive Officer of the SNP, to Sue Ruddock, Chief Operating Officer, to the effect that it was now the right time to put pressure on Police Scotland to move against Alex Salmond. To me, that's orchestration. That's not victim-led. That's orchestration by the cabal. It included the message from Miss Ruddock, I do not recall the recipient, to the effect that the problem was with Free Scotland refusing to detail precisely what evidence they required. What? Is this a joke? If they would specify, then she could get the evidence for them. So she's wanting the police to tell them what evidence that they require to bring forward charges, and she'll get the evidence exactly for them. It included the message from Liz Evans, she's back again, Permanent Secretary to the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Government had abandoned its judicial review case because it lost, to the effect that they had lost a battle but won the war. Well, I don't think so. I think the war's coming to them. After the Scottish Government had abandoned its judicial review to the effect that they had lost a battle but won the war by taking out Alex Salmond, who was already out of the political sphere anyway at this time. But they had to make sure they'd been taken out. Could he be considered a whistleblower? Yeah, and he's now. He talking about Craig Murray being considered a whistleblower. Yes, Craig Murray. Well, I don't know whether Craig Murray would be considered the whistleblower. The other people coming to Craig Murray would be the whistleblowers. Craig Murray is just a person who has used his situation and credibility to actually enlighten the whistleblowers into the public arena, who is now being persecuted by the government, and fake perjury and jigsawing and nonsense like that have now been brought out, and he's now been potentially going to be put in jail for up to 2 years. So if you haven't donated his donations on this website, go and donate to his legal fees and legal appeal. 33. It included the message from redacted to another complainer to the effect that she had a plan that would enable them to have a strongly detrimental effect on Alex Salmond, but with anonymity, because obviously the people who make the allegations, anonymity is protected, even if it's false allegations. So, and if the police are involved in this, then the police then don't have the requirement to actually go after the people who made the false allegations to actually then charge them with perverting the course of justice. So the police, as I went down and asked, won't do anything. It concluded the message from Redacted to the effect that she did not want to attend any further meetings regarding a possible complaint if Redacted were going to be present, as Redacted made her feel pressured rather than supported. So they're trying to force these people to do it. It included the message from Ian McCann to the effect that he would sit on Redacted's complaint until it became necessary to deploy it. It included a number of messages from Redacted which gave the impression she was playing a central role in orchestrating and organising complainers, but I do not recall any specific details of these particular individual messages. 34. Even more critically, this account was consistent with what actually happened at the trial. In common with many observers, I was unimpressed by the performance of Alex Prentice for the prosecution, and truly pathetic and hopeless nature of a number of allegations. Yeah, I was there independently, and I felt exactly the same. These included a daft allegation like the hairpin incident, or the what? Oh, that's true. That's what it was, but it's just ridiculous. Or the easily disproved hand on knee in the car are universally agreed to have weakened rather than strengthened the prosecution's case, where there were much more serious incidents admitted to have some basis in truth. Nor did these minor incidents contribute to Morov being of a much lesser order than the main charges. The only way I could make sense of the Crown's approach was in the light of what had been explained to me months earlier. The idea that the jury might settle on a lesser charge as a form of uh, compromise. So, here again, as in other ways, subsequent events are entirely consistent with what I was told in June 2019, and I confirmed in my belief of corrupt collusion between the Crown Office, and Nicola Sturgeon's office. The Crown Office has now obviously been compromised, and this is a big situation for them. 35. I should state that I did not take notes at any stage in the investigation in any meetings. I'm speaking entirely from memory here. That is why I'm not giving verbatim messages but my memory of them. I have no doubt my memory is correct in essence. I don't know Craig Murray, and I've got no interpersonal interaction, but I know politics as well as I know. And I would say that all of this fits perfectly into the situation just now. Even his persecution fits perfectly into the covering up of the orchestration of false and fake sexual allegations against Alex Salmond. I know instinctively that this is correct. Instinctively. And I trust will be produced to support this statement. 36. Again, my not taking notes reflects FCO training not to write down sensitive information outside of full secure environment, but further to remember in case involving sexual abuse. I was particularly concerned not to take notes that, if lost or overseen, might identify individuals. So that he's been one of the charges that Craig Murray's up is jigsawing. So he's said here that he is not taking any notes to prevent jigsawing of the people who were involved, a lot of whom were civil servants allegedly connected to Nicola Sturgeon. 37. In August 2019, I learned that my friend, the veteran investigative journalist Laura Flynn, had been digging into the events which led to the Court of Session judicial review and had an article written. I offered to host it on my blog. It was extremely interesting and highlighted the role of redacted, a name that was coming up time and time again. 38. We don't know who redacted is. We need to find out who redacted is and what involvement she was in the orchestration. There, man. We got 38. My goodness. Where are we? 38. Come on. 38. Here we go. I therefore published Laurie's article on the 23rd of August 2019 and added further comments, particularly on the role of Redacted, whom I was beginning to consider a rather sinister figure. At this time, I had no idea I had no idea Redacted. Indeed, it is very strange indeed, and quite out of order, that Redacted was such an active member of the Scottish Government Judicial Review Committee. Oh my God. Which had decided to contest the civil case at great expense and was to decide to concede it at great expense. 39. In November 2019, I was told by a senior contact within the SNP, whom I had known for many years, not the same source from June, that a deal had been struck between Peter Morrell, redacted, and redacted, whereby redacted would make an allegation of attempted rape against Alex Salmond, and Morrell would return to frontline politics. Redact. Oh my God. So Morrell's giving backhanded deals to people who make false sexual allegations. Oh my God. The cold bloodedness of this infuriated me. By around this time, I learned the identities of, and I believe, all of the complainers. I would just publish them. I would just actually publish who the complainers were, and let's find out what connection these all have to Nicola Sturgeon and her husband. That's what I would do. I would overturn what there's the Crown Office is already compromised. So and the police are already compromised, so they might as well just actually do this. Yeah. Holy shit's right. Uh, all the complainers, not for a single source, but by asking around my contacts, it was not difficult. 40, I realised that something extraordinary and morally disgusting was happening. If if the public knew the identities of those being put up to make the allegations and just how close to Nicola Sturgeon. See, back to the Black Widow. Everything points back to the Black Widow, Nicola Sturgeon, Mrs. Morell. They were, they would immediately understand what was happening. But the convention protecting the identities of those making allegations of sexual assault made such allegations the perfect vehicle for a positive campaign to frame false charges, while the perpetrators of this conspiracy to pervert the course of justice had the protection of the courts against exposure, and for them to be charged with perverting the course of justice and potentially perjury and potentially abuse of public office and other charges. The accusers included redacted Nicola Sturgeon as the head honcho of this conspiracy, First Minister of Scotland of the SNP, redacted Ian Blackford, UK parliamentary leader of, so Fat Ian is also involved in this, redacted Andrew Robertson, former UK parliamentary leader of the SNP. So you can see, and obviously Jojo Cherry and Angus Robertson were going head to head because Angus Robertson's in the Nicola Sturgeon intersectional lesbian. I think Angus Robertson might be gay, but he's in that camp, and the Jojo Cherry's in the Alex Salmond camp, and they're going to war and doing things. So they're quite happy to conspire and allegedly make false allegations against the former First Minister and destroy his life and his career. And they can get away with it because of the covering up of the people who are making these false allegations by the court, because their names are not allowed to be made public, which is just a joke. I mean, that has to go. It would cause a massive political storm were it known to the public. Just release the names. Release the names. Put it up on the internet. Put it up on social media. You don't even have to do it. Just do it anonymously. Put the names of the people up on social media and get because the Crown Office are compromised. They are not of a standard. They're too embedded with the government, and they're actually politically compromised. James Wolfe will have to resign. It would cause a massive political storm were it known to the public and raise major and, in fact, full justified suspicions about motive. The combination of the anonymity of these accusers and the exclusion from the trial on the grounds of collateral evidence and continued intention of the Crown Office to suppress. Don't forget the Crown Office is also not giving the legal advice to the Parliament, even though they asked twice, of the messages implicating Peter Morell, Susan Ruddock in the conspiracy has resulted in the denial to the Scottish public of information which there is the strongest possible public interest in knowing in order for them to judge the actions of those in power over them. 42. The weight of all this knowledge and of not being allowed to tell it was heavy burden upon me. In general, I strongly support the principle of anonymity for people alleging. I don't support it alleging they were victims of sexual assault. I don't support that at all. I think it's too easily abused. And if you're going to make accusations, we have to find out for precisely this reason that there might be reasons behind these assault charges. What we need to do is get polygraph tests and to find out if who's telling the truth and who's lying. And whoever's lying goes to jail. This was an absolutely unique case where the victims are actually those wielding very considerable power in the state and conspiring to frame an innocent man in the principle of protection for sexual abuse victims of greater public interest than the public interest in being able to form an informed opinion on the massive abuse of state power which was in train. 43. It was at this stage that I formed the opinion that there were questions here that urgently needed to be addressed, but it was not for me to decide. I therefore formed the view that after the trial of Alex Salmond was concluded, the question would have to be put before a court, and when the time came, I acted upon the conviction, that conviction. 44. There was a period of several months where I was fully aware of names of accusers and also fully aware that there was no general law or court order in place preventing me simply from publishing. That, however, would not have been responsible journalism, and I am determined to wait until I could put the matter before the court. The fact I did not publish the then names when I could over months made ludicrous the accusation by Lord Advocate James Wolfe that I intentionally leaked out little bits of information as jigsaw information. Publish them. 45. I would explain that I was not enjoying the investigation at all. In fact, I hated it and was becoming quite seriously depressed by the shock of what I was uncovering. I moved back to Scotland in 2014, specifically in order to campaign for Scottish independence. I had been a member of the Scottish National Party since 2011. It was horrible delusioning to discover the corrupt at the heart of the Scottish government. Not surprised at all. 46. I was also in a deep dilemma as to what to do about it. The same dilemma Alex Salmond was and is in. To expose that was Nicola Sturgeon was the mastermind behind the conspiracy against him would be a real blow to the independence movement. No, it's a real blow to Nicola Sturgeon because she's been incompetent and because she's a global shill. She's been shilling for the Council on Foreign Relations, which she went over to do a pilgrimage before she started her administration. What is a super injunction? I don't know, buddy. I'm not sure what a super injunction is. I'm not a lawyer and don't claim to be, and don't know what a super injunction is. I would Google it, bud, but I don't know if a super injunction would work in this case as well. That's why I would say a public inquiry rather than a super injunction. But there definitely has to be something involved into this. The conspiracy to expose that it was Nicola Sturgeon who masterminded the conspiracy against Alex Salmond would be a real blow to the independence movement. But to watch a plot to imprison an innocent man, destroy his reputation, smear him, get him on the sex offenders register by the political class, potentially for the rest of his life, unfold before my eyes was also horrifying. Particularly, a man with principle, this guy, Craig Murray's the principle and a decent guy, particularly at the most cynical part of the plot to use the quote anonymity granted to the accusers of sexual abuse to disguise what was actually behind the allegations and appear to be working. 47. I would add that in May 2019, I met Alex Salmond in London to record a 50-minute interview for his TV company about my life and career, and I met him again in approximately November 2019 in London for dinner with my good friend and journalist Peter Oborn. On neither occasion was there substantial discussion of the charges against them. 48. On the 21st of November 2019, the Crown released substantial details of the charges against Alex Salmond on 22nd of November. I looked through the newspapers and every Scottish paper had massive front pages coverage, which Liz Lloyd had done, and she had orchestrated that, of the accusations against him. In detail, the front page headline of the Herald: 10 women reduced to 9, 14 charges reduced, I think, to 13 sexual offences, somebody taking their knee touched, Alex Salmond accused. The details of all charges were printed on the front page. Details of all charges were printed on the front page, which had no other content. There were 2 other full pages on the inside. I'm going to get to number 50, guys, and I'm going to give a break for 10-15 minutes, and then I'll come back and do a second live stream. The front page of the Daily Mail had the headline "Salmond in dock" and heading "Former SNP chief appears at court to deny 14 sex offences, including attempted rape, while First Minister." There was no other story on the front page. There was 8 full pages of further coverage inside. The Daily Record front page had Salmond on trial. The charges: 1 attempted rape, 1 intent to rape, 2 indecent assaults, 10 sexual assaults. In dock, 10 women accusing former First Minister of attacks. There was 2 further full pages. Scottish Sun had Salmond rape bid at Bute House. Ex-First Minister sex rap, 10 women, 14 charges, pinned the victim down, and no other story on the front page. The Daily Express had Salmond made naked rape bid. Salmond had made naked rape bid. Full details: 14 sex charges revealed, claims involvement 10 women over 6 years. I am innocent, says ex-First Minister, and no other story on the front page, and 4 more inside. Scotsman had Salmond, the charges: former First Minister accused of lying naked on top of a woman and trying to rape her in Bute House, and no other story on the front page. 50, and I'm going to take a break after I do 50, guys, and then I'll come back in 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then I'll come back. I'll come back at 5 o'clock and finish the last bit of this. So we'll have 2 stages to this. 50, broadcast media took the same tone. I was deeply concerned by the entire tenor of the press coverage, which appeared to be highly hostile to Alex Salmond and present matters in a way that would be bound to influence potential jurors against him. I was also surprised by the sheer detail in the charges which the Crown Office had presented to the media. Right, guys, love you guys. Thanks for sticking by me. Don't forget, 5 o'clock, back on. I'll continue this and we'll get to the last parts of what Mr. Murray has said. Okay. Love you guys. Love my baby gorillas.